Welcome to Scale Without Chaos, the podcast on business growth, visionary leadership, and scalable systems. Each week, you'll hear real stories, the messy parts, and the proven strategies that help leaders grow without burning out their team or themselves. And yes, you'll definitely hear a few spicy takes along the way. Here are some highlights from this week's episode. The solutions for all of the symptoms, for all of the actual problems that you're experiencing in your business, in your team right now, also fit into people, processes, and systems. And when you start identifying symptoms of issues and you start correcting them with things that fit into those buckets, you get a much more holistic solution that will help you to actually solve that issue so much faster and more completely than if you were to put in a Band-Aid fix. And now, this week's episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Scale Without Chaos. I'm your host, Samantha Riel, and I am going to chat with you all today about a concept that I honestly really should have probably gotten into a little bit earlier in this podcast, probably around episode 1 or 2. But here we are. So let's chat about it. It is the Scale Without Chaos framework. And this system works for everyone. Let me say that first. This system works for everyone. It doesn't matter if your company is a handful of people, 5 or less, or a billion-dollar multinational publicly traded corporation. This framework can fit within what you're already doing, help gain clarity, and help you scale. I actually was thinking about this weekend when I was at a sports game for my son, and the food vendor was having such a hard time keeping up with the demand because of several different reasons, all of which probably could have been avoided if we went through this framework with him. But it could be anyone. It doesn't matter. So if you have listened to this podcast before and you've said, Sam, what you're talking about is great, but it doesn't really apply to me, I can tell you this episode will apply to everyone. So let's jump into it. The Scale Without Chaos framework is all about this simple concept. Here it is. Every business issue, every single business issue falls into one of 3 buckets: people, processes, and systems. And by systems, I mean tools. So any technology that you're using, that would be what I would mean by systems. So people, processes, and systems. Now, a lot of you are out there saying right now, of course, Sam, obviously, that's not really new information. And I would agree with that. That part of this framework is not new information. But what is new information, and one that I think has needed to be synthesized into something or condensed into something that is a lot simpler for people to understand, is that so do the solutions. The solutions for all of the symptoms, for all of the actual problems that you're experiencing in your business, in your team right now, also fit into people, processes, and systems. And when you start identifying symptoms of issues and you start correcting them with things that fit into maybe 2 of those buckets, 3 of those buckets, sometimes 1 of those buckets, you get a much more holistic solution that will help you to actually solve that issue so much faster and more completely than if you were to put in a Band-Aid fix. So let me get into sharing a few of these examples with you. And I'm going to tell some real stories from my work, because I think that just makes it that much more relatable. And I think it is also helpful for everyone who's listening here to know you're not alone. These problems are everywhere. Everyone has some type of an issue, but maybe by using these different frameworks, we can figure out a way to fix them together. I am in a business right now, and I am working with them on their CRM. So their customer relationship management system is what CRM stands for those that aren't necessarily familiar with that acronym. It's companies like HubSpot or Salesforce. Those are the big ones. Well, this company is large. They have 250 employees globally, And they started with one CRM system that is, by my standards, an old CRM system, one that hasn't necessarily kept up with the pace of technology. I am not going to name that system, but that's what they started out on. And so then they moved to Salesforce. Great. Salesforce is, by all accounts of what we have available on the market today, a modern system. They do updates all the time. Great. So they're on Salesforce. Well, then they start acquiring other companies that have other CRM systems that are in play. And so now a decision has to be made. Which system are we going to standardize on, or which one is going to be the solution of record? And so this particular company decided, no, we're not going to do that necessarily. We're going to use both. We are going to use both of the systems that our newly acquired companies have already developed their processes on. And there is some merit to that. I will give them credit. There is some merit to that because it takes time. Change management takes time. It takes a while to get people fully integrated into a one company concept. And there's lots of different ways that you can do this. So I give them credit for that. Also, these two systems, being HubSpot and Salesforce, are built specifically to also talk to each other. HubSpot did a lot of work very early on to make sure that their CRM, their system, which started as a marketing system, could talk to Salesforce, because that was a very, very common scenario, still is a very common scenario where people have both HubSpot and Salesforce. So so they make that decision. Fantastic. We go with it. We start looking at some of the issues that are in play here. Now, what we ended up seeing at the end was the symptoms of issues or symptoms of problems. So here's what showed up. We had a lack of pipeline, number one. So lack of pipeline. That showed up in low sales numbers at the end of the quarter. So it was people missing goals at the end of the quarter. We also ended up seeing that there was a lack of MQL conversion to SQL. So marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead. So anyone in the B2B tech space or B2B space, those terms mean something to you. For anyone who's not, basically it's anyone who has an interest in your company actually becoming an opportunity. So someone who is eventually going to buy from you. So all those definitions, all those fancy words, that's essentially what it means, is anyone who might eventually buy from you. So we had a lack of those things, which ultimately raises alarm bells because that means lack of revenue further on down the line. So we start to look at it. Now, in the Scale Without Chaos framework, people, processes, and systems, we start to dig in a little bit and we start to go into each one of those issues and say, okay, where are we having some problems in the people bucket? We find out that the people who are responsible for these particular processes, so processes is another one, but people who are responsible for these don't know that they are. That was a fun one. They don't know. They don't know all of the intricate details of, I need to do this and I need to make sure I update this field and I need to do this. And that is how we move a prospect from one place to another. Didn't know that. There was also some actual performance situation issues, which I think is very common in these types of scenarios. So there was a coaching component that needed to happen. So we put those squarely in the people bucket. Training was another big one. So those were the three main things we found in people. In the processes bucket, first of all, there was a lack of. And that's very easy to diagnose. When you start actually following a customer journey through your company, and there's a break point, there isn't an easy next step to go, that's an easy place to see that there's a process broken. So we had some process issues just in general. So definition of particular stages, we had an issue of process just moving from one to another. We had SLA issues. And those that have listened to the podcast for a while know that I am not a fan of service level agreements or SLAs because I think that gives people an excuse rather than an enablement. But in this particular case, we needed to start somewhere. So there were SLA issues as well. So leads not being followed up with within 24 hours. All of those things were happening. And then finally, tools, systems, tools. the tools weren't talking to each other in all scenarios. So yes, there was a sync that was set up. So Salesforce and HubSpot were actually communicating back and forth and sending information between the two. But then above and beyond that, there weren't workflows in place to actually associate things like deals with contacts so that the marketing team would actually be able to pull the reporting, which they decided the reporting would come out of HubSpot from the marketing team. So there's so many individual areas just in that, a big chunk of that we're seeing a dip in revenue. That's all of the things when you start breaking down people, processes, and systems. So what did we do? We wrote it all down. We actually went through each stage between marketing and sales, CRM, wrote it all down and said, here's all the things that we have identified. So now let's talk about the fixes. What are the things that we are going to do across people, processes, and systems for each one of these things to make sure that we are going to fix this one time, at least as much as we can. We're going to fix this one time. And we're not going to be back here in 6 months wondering, well, is the reason that we don't have revenue because we have all these issues? No, it's because they're all fixed and we're able to move forward. So we sat down and put them all in buckets and then started to prioritize and started to put some timelines against them with the help of a very good project manager. Pretty simple, right? So that's a company that's fairly large using a CRM. Like that's a fairly standard business practice. How would you do that in a company that's 10 people or less? The exact same way, except your issues, maybe you can find a little bit faster because there's not so many layers to hide behind. There's not so many fingers to point in different directions. It's if this person doesn't do it, or if this system is broken, it's pretty obvious from the beginning. But that also means that you're a little bit more agile and you can fix them quicker too. You can put that fix in place and see the results quicker. On the larger side of business, it takes a little bit more time, but it does come and it is there. So people, processes, and systems, all of your problems fit into one of those 3 buckets. So do the solutions. When you map it out, that will get you a longer term fix, one that lasts, one that works for your business, and one that helps you scale. Excellent. Awesome. So if you have any questions, shoot them my way. I love to hear them. Any feedback on the podcast, I love that too. You all know how to get in touch with me. Send me a DM, send me an email. Please subscribe where you listen. And until next time, keep building. Thank you for tuning in to Scale Without Chaos. If today's episode sparked new ideas or gave you a fresh perspective, do me a favor. Hit that follow button, subscribe for new episodes, and share this with someone who's going through what we talked about today. This podcast is all about visionary leadership, sustainable business growth, and the systems that make scale possible. For more content, free resources, and behind-the-scenes insights, connect with me on LinkedIn, follow along on Instagram at Scale Without Chaos, and subscribe to the newsletter.